Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Innovating Out Loud. For those of you that have attended before, welcome back. And for those of you that are new, welcome to this little segment. We have a lot of fun with it. If you read some of the taglines, we call it Say It Ugly. You'll see it in there. So really, this is just an open, honest, fun conversation between active innovators, sharing what we're learning, what we're seeing, and how we're navigating driving innovation forward, especially amongst all this disruption that we're facing day in and day out. And that's really what the conversation will center around today. We are so excited to have Juliana here. She is the head of Xbox hardware operations. So we will dig into her world a little bit, understand what's going on there, and then just unpack how she has successfully drove innovation, not only in her current role, but in previous roles, and also how to do it in today's current state that is just filled with a whole lot of uncertainty, change, macroeconomics, you name it. So with that, one other housekeeping item is we will do Q&A at the end. We'll chat for about 40 minutes or so, do Q&A. So as questions come up, please drop them in the chat and we will circle back to those at the end. With that, maybe Juliana and JoAnn, if you want to both give a quick intro of who you are for those that don't know. While I have the mic, I'll just introduce myself really quickly. My name is Taryn Kuches. I'm a founding partner in Regenerous Labs, where we're really focused on driving regenerative innovations, products, and solutions in a number of different capacities. So, of course, innovation is at the core of what we do. Juliana, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Taryn. And one thing I would say about my role is that it's never dull. Like it's never boring because things are always changing, whether it's tariff or supply chain, as JoAnn talked about. Um, one part of my role that doesn't show up in the title that I have is actually the strategy work. So the operations part is more about today's world, right? And what we do on a day-to-day basis. But there's the strategy part about thinking ahead, or how do we do things differently to continue to to get to where we want to go, right? My name is Juliana Tioanda, and I spent two-thirds of my career life in consulting. That's almost 2 decades in consulting, and then the other third in at Microsoft. And I would see myself as bridge maker. If I think about all the different roles that I've had, and I've had different roles throughout my career, but even as a consultant, and even in today's world, my job is about crossing boundaries. It's about bringing people together, connecting people together, and bringing everyone along towards marching towards the same goal. And my role often stands in the intersection of business, technology, and people. And
Mm.
I always believe that if there's a way to invert that, people is at the bottom of it because that's the foundation of everything that we do. Without people, we won't be able to get anywhere.
Mhm. Love that.
And I am fortunate enough to know Juliana from Microsoft. For those of you who don't know me, I'm JoAnn Garbin. I am a co-founder of Regenerous Labs with Taryn, but previously I was at Microsoft for 5 years leading the data center of the future. And more fun, I wrote the Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft with my co-author, Dean Carignan, and Juliana was one of our contributors in the Xbox chapter. And it we always knew it had an edge as a chapter because it's about gaming. Like we knew it was going to be a favorite. But really, what came out was it's the favorite because what Juliana and Xbox have done is make culture and how people work together a product. And so there's so many good lessons in that chapter about how to intentionally design and build the culture you want from yourself all the way out through a giant organization moving at light speed. So with that, I'll give it back to
Perfect.
Taryn.
Yeah, perfect. I love Juliana how you said, there's things you do that aren't in your title, strategy being one of them. But I think, as we're entering into the world, we're at innovation is part of all of our titles. It's about thinking how to do things differently in new ways with the tools available. I think all of us innovators are like, is innovation finally going to have its moment? Like, are people going to see it? And wishful thinking. But on the flip side, there is a really um, kind of new opportunity and new business context in which we're all working and operating in, primarily because of AI. But then you factor in, right? Regenerative principles, sustainability, all the things that are stacking up, and we have to figure out how to solve those in our day to day. And so, if we think of all of ourselves as innovators for a moment, Juliana and JoAnn, when we were just kind of prepping for this, we said, change feels hard right now because there's so much change happening to us. Right? There's technology, global events, macroeconomics. You turn on the news and it is just, it's hard to watch. And so our conversation was like, how do we as individuals find the drive and the momentum, and the passion to drive even more change, voluntary change and innovation in our day-to-day lives with all the disruption going on around us. So maybe just reflect to kind of add your 2 cents to the topic at hand and any thoughts you have.
Yeah, totally. There's all the things that are swirling around us. We can't really control, right? So I always go back to what's the only thing that I can control? And that's me. That's my own very environment. If we try to reduce all the noise around us, the only thing that we can really control is us.
Mhm.
And if you think about innovation, there's no innovation if there's no people, like going back to people again. And every single one of us, every individual can be an innovator. And
Hmm.
we are the catalyst. We are what controls what happens, right? So innovation doesn't happen without people. So then if I'm one of those people, how can I help drive the change? But it starts with us, right? So it's introspection. And JoAnn had a LinkedIn post, a Substack post as well, on this about the what, the introspection. Look at ourselves. And so for me personally, when things are swirling, it is looking inward to see how can I change? How do I think differently about solving the problems? Because that's what innovation is, right? Do you remember Michael Vance, who talked about out of the box thinking? He
Hmm.
was with Disney, and he's the one who popularized the think outside the box. So
Yeah.
he has a very popular quote, and I might misquote him, but it's something along the line of innovation is not just the creation of a new, but also the rearranging of the old in a new way.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so when I think about that, is that how do I rearrange me, my thought process, my processes that I have control over to
Hmm.
accomplish something new, to do things differently?
Hmm.
Neat.
I recently so on my team, we've been pushing everybody to say, hey, leverage AI. You need to learn it. You need to be hands-on. You need to practice it. Go experiment, right? And our team members keep hearing that from top down, and they're like, yeah, but the tool is not doing what it needs to do. And I'm so proud of Mike Duggan on my team, who at some point had a light bulb that clicked, and he was like, I realize that it's actually me. I need to change how I interact with the tool. It's not
Mm.
trying to jam the tool into my day to day, but it
Mhm.
is how do I think differently? I'll use an
Hmm.
example where he was like, in the past, he would take notes with OneNote, but at the moment, Copilot doesn't grab a lot of the things in OneNote for various reasons, permissions, and security and all that. Um, and so what he did was he changed how he took notes. And he was like, okay, I can still take notes on OneNote, but let me send it to myself in email because guess what? Copilot is amazing at
Yeah.
summarizing things in email. So that's him going, I'm going to try things differently and work with the tool that I have. And in the process, he's also training the tool, right? And so I love that about our team members who are now starting to think about, well, what are those things that we can do differently? Let's look at ourselves and what we can control.
Hmm.
Yep. And It's funny when you talked about the piece I shared this week for the Innovating Out Loud series, the written series, that difference in introspection, I maybe everybody else is walking around with it in their heads, but I'm nearly 50 and I was like, oh, what, not why. When if you look inside about what you can control, what you want to do, what's going on around you, what are the limitations or the opportunities, all of a sudden it's this cognitive decision making, you can really frame it and deal with it. If instead you're asking, why is this happening? Why don't I know how to do this? Why can't I figure it out? That actually, if you do that as an introspective habit, the overwhelming evidence is you're going to distress yourself. You're going to get stressed out, overwhelmed, depressed, and that is going to inhibit your ability to grow and innovate and collaborate and create. And so it feels like such a little thing. And I feel like, I definitely felt like, how did I not recognize that? And I think I will be honest, I think a lot of times I default to what, and it's why I've been able to work with you and others to create really cool things. But I also know there are circumstances that occur, and you know this, Juliana, because we've had lunch together in those moments where I'm so overwhelmed by actually what's going on around me, but I'm not asking what's going on. I'm asking why. Why are they mad at me for doing my job? Why are they mad at me for asking how it works and wanting to change it?
Why are they not listening to me?
Yes. And I now see that so differently as, oh, I was not helping myself in those moments. Like, and it's human to be emotional about things, but had I been able to just distance and say, what is happening? What is going on? Probably would have been a lot less painful.
Yeah.
hmm hmm Yeah, I think the key is understanding like the sphere of what you can control in this moment, right? And acknowledging that yes, it is overwhelming. Yes, it is distracting.
Mhm.
Yes, it does make me pause or hesitate to like drive action and do some of that introspection. But I think the other reality that we're having to manage simultaneously is sitting around and doing nothing isn't an option. Things are moving faster than they ever have before. And so, how do you reconcile those two almost competing realities where one is like, I am just overwhelmed by everything going on around me, yet I have to keep moving? Kind of what I heard both of you saying in different ways is it starts with ourselves and what we can control and our mindsets and the introspection, right? And so, Juliana, there's something you said about, innovation. Everybody for as long as they've been in innovation, here's the words innovation, and they think new product development. They usually connect it to tech, right? It's something that's new, and it's not just incrementally new. It's like the next iPhone, right? It's like that's the connection innovation gets. But in reality, it's so much more influential throughout how we just approach our work and
Yeah.
how we think about things as simple as note taking. Um, and really, it comes down to how we as individuals approach our work, about our attitude and our posture. What thoughts kind of stir up for you both as we just kind of take a step back and think through that?
Go ahead,
JoAnn,
Juliana.
do you want to
Yeah,
go
you're the
first or do you want
star.
me to go?
You go for it.
Okay.
You're the mentor.
We talk about innovation, and earlier, JoAnn, you mentioned something about invention as well. And this goes back to your comment, Taryn, about product development. We often think about it as
Right.
technology or product development, new product development, right? And
Mm-hmm.
new cool product development. But there's actually a difference between invention and innovation. We often use it interchangeably, but it's not. Innovation is bigger than that. Invention is, yes, invention of product or new technology, but innovation is much broader and it encompasses the total process, again, there's a quote that I've seen somewhere, and I don't remember who said it, but it basically talks about innovation is it's a total of all the little sub processes underneath it.
Mm,
And so if we just tweak one of those sub processes, right, you are innovating in new ways. You're innovating.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what I go back to is that the way we innovate, it's not just about technology, but it's about our business model. It's about our process. It's about, how we take notes. It's about our day to day. And it starts very small from every little decision we make, every habit. And, it's the micro habits that we have. And
mhm,
then when you accumulate that, that's what leads to big changes. Even
Yeah.
AI, it took a while. AI has been around for a long time, right?
mhm,
Accumulation of those little changes over multiple decades that all of a sudden we have this hockey stick
mhm.
explosion around AI just a few years ago. But it has
Yeah.
been
Overnight
around. I mean,
success.
what's that? And then hurrah,
Over-
people only see the success and that
yeah.
burst. They don't see all the little things and the failures and the mistakes that people have made, right, along the
Yeah.
way.
Mhm,
And I think that that's also key. I have two things to say. One is about learning from mistakes and all the failures and all the fall downs. I mean, think about Apollo 1 when they blew up on Launchpad, killing everybody, but which is heartbreaking. But 2 years later, they landed people on the moon, right? And
Right.
um, but we often forget about those hard moments, and we get so discouraged. To JoAnn's point earlier, is that it's so distressful when you're right inside it. Um, Sometimes it's helpful to just zoom out. And then, which leads me to the second point, which is how do we zoom out? It's hard to zoom out
mhm,
if we don't pause. And
mhm.
so I think this idea of pausing and repivoting and giving your brain and your mind a chance to build new neuron pathways is important. And that is it's so hard and it requires practice. So for me personally, that's something that I've been trying to practice, which is how do I pause in the midst of all the chaos
Mm.
so that I can think clearly, so that I can be creative. And it's the finding that pause and just go, too much. I need to recenter. And that recentering is so key, I found, in my ability to then re-engage in a more productive way.
Yeah. Yes. And I think, Juliana, you, having known you you do it much better than a lot of people. And that's one of the reasons when we met, I was like, I need to hang around with her more because I know me, like the same energy that gets me to do wildly hard, big things in business and in technology and in creativity. That same energy is what fuels my anxiety in those overwhelming moments. It's like, and figuring out how to tease them apart. I joke with people, I'm joking about my own health, so I can joke about this. I joke with people that it took cancer to teach me to pause because it was a forcing function of you're not in control here. Like you show up and you do what they tell you to do to the best of your ability, and it may or may not work. That's like kind of the recipe of innovation, too. It's like you show up, you do what you can do to the best of your ability, and it may or may not work. But if you and all your teammates are doing that together and taking those moments of pause because we're human and we're going to get overwhelmed, but also being mindful of each other and the environment that you create for one another, then, you know, the whole phrase of say it ugly is about getting rid of those. Don't worry about being perfect and whatever. I'm going to say it ugly. If we all do that, there's going to be less of that overwhelm and friction that's just natural when you get more than one human in a space doing something, right? So
Mhm.
it don't wait for cancer to teach you that. I'm
Take a
just
lesson.
really
Yeah.
thick-headed.
No, I think many of us hit that part where it is really where we are struggling, where we hit rock bottom, or where we realize that what got us here won't get us there or get us to where we want to go, right? It's that moment that we realize that we have to do things differently.
Yeah.
And yeah, for sure. I mean, for myself as well. Taryn, I think this is really appropriate as we're thinking about, okay, it took us almost,
Mm,
for JoAnn, almost 5 decades, and likewise for me as well. I would say I'm still learning on that
Oh yeah.
process, and it's been over 5 decades. And um, but there's somebody who is doing it brilliantly. And as we think about the Winter Olympics that just concluded,
mhm.
Eileen Gu, she is the most decorated free skier
Freestyle. Yeah.
freestyle skier in the world. She's 22 years old, but I think she's figured this out. Do you mind if I play a video of her recent interview that just talks precisely about this? So let me
I
see if
think
I
that'd
can
be
share
perfect.
yeah, let's hope there's no tech hacks here. So let me share.
If not, if there are, we'll blame XD, who's also former Microsoft and now is the CTO of Zoom.
Oh, okay.
So we'll email them and be like, XD.
Yeah. Can you see the screen?
We
Yes.
can
Let
see
me
it.
see if I can play the sound now.
Do you think before you speak? Because you answer questions so quickly and so comprehensively, whether it's about geopolitics or your sport or aerodynamics. Like, can you take us into your brain? Thank you, Charlotte. That's very kind. Um, oh man, do I think? I think overall I'm just a pensive person. Like I'm an introspective young woman. Like I spend a lot of time in my head. And it's not a bad place to be. I journal a lot. I break down all of my thought processes. I think I apply a very analytical lens to my own thinking and I kind of modify it because it's so interesting. You can control what you think. Like you can control how you think, and therefore you can control who you are. And especially as a young person, like I'm 22, so with neuroplasticity on my side, I can literally become exactly who I want to be. How cool is that? Like, how empowering is that, right? And so the fact is, I get to become every day the kind of person that me at age 8 would revere. Like, I would be obsessed with me today. Are you kidding? I would love me. And I think that's the biggest flex of all time that you can have like little younger you be proud of you today. And so I guess for me, it's like, yes, I spend a lot of time in my own head. Yes, I think a lot, but it's not really like in an egotistical kind of way. It's in like a tinkering, like a scientist kind of way. I'm always like trying to modify. I'm trying to think, how can I be better? How can I approach my own brain the way that I approach my craft of free skiing, so that I can be better tomorrow than I was today?
Brilliant.
Such a great clip.
So brilliant.
This
I
isn't
get.
supposed to be a rude question,
Oh,
but
sorry.
do
Hold
you
on.
think before
Hey,
you speak, because
it
you
just play in a loop. Sorry about that.
Okay.
So good. And you know what it makes me think of is education, formal education. So what she's talking about is got a name. It's called metacognition, thinking about thinking, and it's a
Mhm.
philosophical discipline. Now we bucket it into if you're studying philosophy, you're going to come across metacognition. But it used to just be part of our foundational education opportunities. Like it was the same as learning to add and make arguments, rhetorical arguments and things like that. So it's kind of interesting. In the lab we talk about this intersection of innovation across health, um, physical, like human health, natural health, and education. And the
Mhm.
reason education is in there is because if you don't know that these things are out there, that these tools exist and they're actually in you too, you don't use them. It's
Mhm.
um yeah, another one that just came up this week in chat on LinkedIn with the Scott Anthony, who wrote Epic Disruptions, which is like these massive changes in human history. It's the history of like the transistor and gunpowder and, you know, fresh air in hospitals. So Scott says it's like it's lenses. It's you're acquiring all these lenses. And I love that because it's this physical thing. And I'm a mechanical engineer. So I like things I can touch. And it's like, yeah, I got my toolbox. I'm going to fill it full of lenses. I'm going to put a hammer and other stuff in there. I'm going to put what, why, and who in there. Like, if you can start accumulating those tools, then somehow some people at 22 figure out how to pull those tools out anytime.
Mhm.
Others of us, it takes a little longer.
Yeah.
I also think the power of mindsets is I mean it's connected to all of this, but it almost frames how you think, how you introspect. And
Mhm.
so just like, a key example for us is like there's a word for 2026 as it relates to kind of business and innovation that we've centered around, and that word is learn. So we've
Mhm.
framed it in our minds that like this year is all about learning. And so then if you take that mindset and you're going through the process of thinking about your thinking, your metacognition, all the things we talked about. If you have a lens of this year is about learning, or this my mindset is about learning, things that didn't go well are not going to frustrate me. Things that go well are not going to get me upset. They're all framed as a learning opportunity. And so I think in innovation as well, like the mindsets of how you view the lens in which you view what's happening and what you're realizing and what you're processing is almost the thing that kind of catapults where you end up and like how you get there. And so I'm curious how both of you think about mindsets and maybe attitudes and kind of your perspective in which you approach things and the lens in which you analyze things through as it relates to innovation.
Few
Yeah.
things. Take a look at what I'm wearing. Hashtag always learning.
I love that.
I did
Shout out
notice.
to Iselina who made this sweatshirt for me a few years ago when that became our motto for the team is that we're always
Hmm.
learning, right? To your point, Taryn. It's
Hmm.
all about mindset. And Satya talks about this, changing from know it all to learn it all.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I think that's where growth mindset comes from, right? It's always learning. And if you notice the caption of the video, the second thing was the caption of the video from Eileen when she posted the TikTok
Oh,
was learning to learn.
oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah, that's just brilliant. I didn't notice it until like I've, seen the video like the third time and I was like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, duh, like that makes total sense. Um, and then after that video came out and became viral, there's a neurosurgeon who is
Mm.
talking about this neuroplasticity, right? That she talked about
Hmm.
in there is that you can actually train your brain and form new synapses, right? And so what
Yeah.
happens is that we have these billions of neurons in our brain that they're firing all the time, but you can actually train your neurons to fire together in a way that you want. And there's a way to shape that, and that's what she was talking about. And the
Hmm.
way the surgeon explained it was that what she's doing, it's kind of like walking on grass. When you're walking on grass, the first time you walk on grass, you won't really see the the footsteps or whatever. Maybe it's a little indented and all that. But you walk through that path enough times, it becomes a path. And that's what our brain does. That is part of learning. That's how we learn,
Mm.
like how to bike. We stumble, we fall. That's your first time taking it. Your brain is learning. It's clumsy, right? But you do it with enough practice, then it becomes a pathway. And now your muscle
Hmm.
memory kicks in.
Yeah.
And what Eileen was talking about was that she practices how to be calm under pressure. So she practices, she builds that neural pathway of, I know how to do this, I'm going to be calm. And so she practices that until she is always calm and she knows how to
Mm.
kick, turn on that muscle memory when
Yeah.
she needs to be at peak performance.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
we've built a relationship with Michael Gervais from Finding Mastery, and he's a high performance coach with the Seattle Seahawks and Olympians. And And he talks about that all the time, about these top of their field athletics. And he worked with Satya on growth
Yep.
mindset. And it's learnable. It's habits that you form. But I'm
Yeah.
going to go the nerdy way with it. But it's also, I'll give you a biomechanical example of that, because it totally blew my mind when I read it years ago in this book by a physicist. I think it's called A Beautiful Question. And he's just exploring reality. And it's a really easy book to read. Like, he wrote it not as a physicist. He's very, very easy to understand. Um, and he talks about the little fibers in our ears. And apparently, and I'm going to, paraphrase and muff this up, but they actually learn what they're supposed to receive through that habituation. And each little one is connected back to neurons firing.
Mhm.
So this is why when you hear music that you've never heard before, like maybe you hear a sitar for the first time and you're like, oh gosh, what the heck is that? Or experimental jazz, and it's because those little things don't know what to tell your brain, and your brain's like, ah. But this, if you keep listening,
Mhm.
eventually those things, this is training your ear, they actually connect the dots for you. And that's how you can learn to love music that at first you're like, ugh, because it's just, you've not grown up around it. So it's uncomfortable. It's physically uncomfortable for your brain to listen to something that you've not heard progressively throughout your life.
It's dissonance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Until it
literally
becomes
dissonance.
resonance. Yeah. It's like tuning the radio. You
Yeah,
find what is that frequency that gives you resonance, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it.
And
Amazing. Yeah.
And then the other thing, you've both said the word attitude now and posture. And when we were chatting before, it was that word attitude shows up in so many things. Like the prima ballerina, attitude for her means posture and position and foot and hand and head and neck. But for an airline pilot, it's the position relative to the ground and the horizon, right? And then Juliana, you shared that great fact with us about pilots and the path we're on.
Yeah, one of the this was a leadership workshop that I attended many, many, many years ago. I want to say even 20 years ago that um, the when you're flying a plane, you know how with GPS there's that you can look at a map and it'll show the navigation of where to go. And if you check my flight um, and the speaker said, who happened to be a pilot, said, "Do you know how often we veer off that line, that path that we're supposed to be following based on navigation?" And we all guessed. And we did this little experiment as well, but it's a lot more than we thought. It was over 90%, 97% if I didn't recall correctly. But it's huge, it's a huge number. More often than not, you're not right on the path. Why? Because you have wind, you have birds, you have all kinds of factors, clouds that are affecting where you are, but it is how you get back to center that is important when you're flying. And for anybody who's a pilot out there, feel free to correct that and or give me the right stats to use. But that had stayed with me over the last few decades, especially when I make mistakes, right? JoAnn, back to what you were saying earlier, that it's so easy to distress ourselves and to get bogged down. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I did that wrong, or why, I should have done that. But the should have is in the past. Like we can't change that. So what do we need to do to then get back to path? And it
Yeah.
requires reminders. Like I'm just like everybody else, like emotions, and we get our own judgment and fear and all that hijack us all the time. But it's practicing how do we get back to center as quickly as possible.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
And that appreciation that, and we say this in the book, we say this all the time. In the book, we say everything is loopy. Innovation is
mhm,
loopy. You're always looping forward, but
mhm.
there's like this, you're learning. And the airline is so great because it's like, it's also wiggly. Like when you
Hmm.
zoom in on it, it's not a smooth loop, it's a wiggly loop. And as long as you keep coming back to whatever path you're on or want to be on, that intention is more critical than the actual path you follow. Like if, the airline pilot's like, we're headed to San Francisco, and then, midair, they're like, yeah, just kidding. We're going to Phoenix. That's not great.
Yeah,
Right. So your intention is the thing you want to really
that's right.
hold on to a point until, that has to change. But yeah, wiggle, loop, messy. That's when, as for me at least, throughout my career and with my team, knowing that it's wiggly and loopy and messy, then we're not upset by the fact that it's
The
wiggly and loopy and
mindset.
messy.
It's the
Right.
mindset. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's totally
Hmm.
the mindset. And on the I think knowing the intention or where you're going is important. Like don't just fly for the sake of flying. You want to know where you're going, right? And it's okay if your intention is that I just want to fly in a loop, but usually you know where you're heading, at least directionally where you're heading. And I think that's what matters. And sometimes it's if you
Hmm.
find out, hey, that airport is closed because of snowstorm that's about to come in,
Yeah.
then you redirect,
Change
and
course.
that's exactly what happens in real life. And you
Hmm.
just you take detours, and that's totally okay as well. Wait for a sunny day. Wait for when all the stars align, when the condition is there for you to fly to your destination. And innovation is the same thing, is knowing what problems you're trying to solve
Yeah.
and then doing things differently, like what we said before.
Hmm.
You mentioned about Mike Gervais. If I can add one more thing on that,
Yeah.
Taryn.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of his and of Pete Carroll, and I have attended multiple of the workshops that they did at Microsoft as well. One thing I remember very clearly of Mike Gervais saying is that performance is 90% mine, but we
Mm.
spend 90% of our time or more, and maybe this is not the exact quote from him, but we spend most of our time in perfecting our craft and our
Yeah.
body and very little time in perfecting our mind and how our mind work. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of what he does with top performing art athletes, right,
Athletes.
and even leaders, is to focus on how do you work with the mind? How do you train? How do you create that practice? Just like we create practice for the body and craft, whether it's freestyle skiing or operations or
Hmm.
Right.
working in the lab. So
Yeah. And I
It's
think that
interesting.
practice, really good, just to piggyback, I
Yeah.
think that practice of focusing on the mind and mindsets and why our whole conversation is centered around that is because in today's world, to innovate successfully, you have to be able to think not emotionally about the noise because it's out there, it's
Yeah.
happening, right? We talked a lot about the spheres of influence and thinking about it in rings and our prep calls. Like we have ourselves, minds, we have maybe our team and our organizations, and we have the broader world. And we're existing and working and living and playing and all the things in a climate right now where that broader world is very noisy. And so the practice of things we talked about on this, of journaling, of establishing mindsets, of taking the time to pause, are more relevant than ever to drive successful innovation because it takes, candidly, more of a mental shift to be able to process all the things going on around us and still show up with the drive to bring ourselves and our teams along to drive the change we all know is so necessary right now, whether it's within ourselves or our teams or broader organizations, et cetera. And so just kind of connecting all that to where we started and how impactful and why it feels like it's so relevant right now. And go ahead, JoAnn. I just had that thought
I was
bubbling.
just building on that and what Juliana said. It's interesting. There's a stat in innovation that is roughly 90% of the dollars we put into innovation are put toward technology development. But
mm,
90% of the value created from innovation is everything you need to do upstream and downstream from the product to make it successful in the world.
Hmm.
So it's just funny how these patterns show up it's funny and it's not to me because it's the manifestation of being human, right? Like we create this world. And when I think about those concentric circles you just mentioned of influence and control, so Juliana has this objective at the team level to get a group of people to perform innovatively and efficiently and together, in a thriving environment, not just like grueling, et cetera. But how much easier would that be? And I do think your team does this, by the way, Juliana, if each individual in that inner circle of themselves took accountability and responsibility for the practices that you can do, because we see Olympians and everybody else do it, you can practice that mindset of quieting the noise, being comfortable with the wiggle. So if each one of us individually does that cumulatively, it gets easier to achieve that as a group, and then as a company, and then as a community at large, and then as a society. Like it really, when we feel like everything's out of our control, that's exactly when what we can do best is be that person that's doing the practice and influencing the people around them to also do that practice.
Yeah, I want to build on that really quick. How do we try to make that a practice, right? Often people, when we talk about mindset or mindfulness, people associate it with meditation or something
Meditation.
hard and
Hmm.
that you need to be sitting on a cushion in the corner somewhere.
Right.
Um, but that's not the case, right? Finding that pause can be as simple as walking the dog. Like I do that a lot. When I need to recenter, walking my dog is my way of pausing and giving myself that breathing room. And there's this concept about positive intelligence by Shirat Shamin. And one of the things that he does is that, hey, just rub your two fingertips together intently, close your eyes for like 90 seconds or 2 minutes. And that's a good way to pause. Like, and you don't even have to close your eyes. Like if you're in a heated conversation with somebody over
Mm.
Zoom call or Teams call, you could also do this, behind your back or on your lap, and no one can see it, but it's an intentional pause, refocusing your brain to say, don't get pulled by the swirl, come back to
Hmm.
the center, right? And sometimes it's about taking 5 deep breaths or whatever it is. Or if you're a musician, go play an instrument, go play guitar. Or if you're a singer, go sing in the shower or wherever you want to do it. But it doesn't have to be hard, and it doesn't have to be, it's not about meditation or, which often people think that way. But it is really about creating that pause, even if it's only a few seconds, even if it's just 60 seconds. That makes a difference
Yeah.
in how our brain functions.
Imagine if
Hmm.
we all did that. And
Hmm.
not just like once in a while, like that's the really cool thing about innovation, life, all. We talk about this a lot in the lab. That reality is the sum total of all the little decisions every one
Hmm.
of us is making all the time, and how those decisions collide with one another. So if everybody would just start like grab a rock and like rub the rock for a second. That's my thing. I have rocks on my desk, and that's what I
Yeah.
do to like get my brain to focus on something when it gets a little too scattered. And Lord knows I have not perfected this. But I think the more collaborative and creative you are, you see what other people do. Like I learn a ton working with Taryn because we approach things from very different directions.
Hmm.
And even just in the last year of collaborating on building the lab, I find myself going, and then I'm like, wait, what would Taryn do? What's she going to say when I tell her this? And then it's slowly adapting me. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean I'm not me anymore. It just means that I now have somebody in my life that's given me new skills and new perspectives. And it's really great because I feel more equipped, like literally equipped.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Taryn,
That's
we're
great.
gonna have that t-shirt made WWTD. What would Taryn do?
Gosh.
And
I
bracelets.
don't know. Yeah, bracelets. I don't know. I don't know if we
A
want to
lot
go
of
down that
times it's like, before I send this to the team, what's Taryn
That's
going to
very good.
say?
Because I say it ugly a lot though too. That's maybe why. It's a good
She's
hack.
the truth and the reality in the room with a couple of dreamers.
Well, this is a great kind of segue into some questions, and it's piggybacking off of a couple of things we talked about. And Juliana, I have one for you. You used the phrase "perfecting the mind" as we were talking. Just elaborate on what do you mean by that? What
It's
is,
the neuroplasticity concept that Eileen Gu was talking about. It's
Yeah.
you need to practice and strengthen your mind, right? Your mind, just like when you go to the gym to work out and build strength, we don't do a lot in strengthening our mind and building those positive pathways. How do we
hmm
train our mind to stay calm through a lot of commotions and changes? And that is about training your mind. And Eileen talked about that. And if you search neuroplasticity, use ChatGPT or just go, even on Google search, or Bing search, that you'll learn, you'll hear a lot about how do you train your mind. And there are ways, and it's scientific, right? It's based on science on how you train your mind, to take pauses and redirect it to where you want to go. People often, you've probably heard about affirmations. A lot of people say, "Hey, let's do affirmations," and we're saying, I am strong. I am, like that is part of the neuroplasticity concept of you're telling your brain, because your brain can't really tell the difference between what's real and what's not. So if you
Yeah.
tell
hmm
it a story, it's going to believe whatever story you tell. So the perfecting the mind is work with your mind the same way you would work with your body, or what Michael Gervais said about your craft, right? Perfecting your craft, which is your trade. So if you're an accountant, perfecting accounting, that's your craft, then
hmm
we often spend so much time going to school for that and dedicate learning to that, but we don't learn how to work with our own mind when more than 90% of our performance is based on our mind and how our mind works.
hmm hmm
Yeah.
That's great. Great. Our next question, you both are going to love this. Um, Joanne, you studied Xbox in your book.
Mhm.
How would you and Juliana characterize what this moment of change means in context of either Xbox or, previous roles, innovation history? Like how are you, based on what you've done up to this point, approaching innovation slightly differently amidst all the change going on?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to take it with a grain of salt because I am somebody that nature and nurture has wired me to love ambiguity and change. I actually get really frustrated when things aren't moving. Um, and we need everybody. If you read the fourth pattern in the book and the third pattern, you need everybody to do innovation, because I would be terrible at bringing it to market, like over time. But what I love about this moment is I see the creative bar coming down, where since we moved into the digital economy, there was this high bar of having to know how to code, which has never been something I gravitated toward. Even though I've been building tech for 25 years, I always had to have an engineer, a real engineer, code it for me. And now I can actually participate in that prototyping and that visioning. Like, I can get off the paper and into the code, and I can build things and I can blow things up and do my thought experiments, can get out of my head more rapidly. And that has allowed me to test a lot more of my theories and hypotheses and let go of them quicker. So I just feel like, yes, the speed that we're moving at is a bit overwhelming and crazy. But I'm not worrying about it too much because I'm just like, ooh, this tool could not do this 2 weeks ago, and now it can. So I'm going to
Mm,
go back to that experiment that I couldn't do 2 weeks ago. I'm going to try it now, and maybe that'll help move us forward on our intentional path, you know? And so it's the practice of staying the course, but also, man, as these things unfold, I'm like, holy crap, that's amazing. So I see it. I see a lot of people who were never creators now feeling like creators again, which is just so fulfilling. I see people feeling more fulfilled by it.
mm,
Yeah, I see it as a democratization of access to creation as well when we
mm,
think about excuse me, when we think about content creation. If you now have tools that can um, leap ahead and give you the efficiency and that you need, right? Then and make it easier for everybody to create. That's amazing. But to answer the question of how would we characterize this moment of change, is it's opportunities. I see it as
mm,
opportunities for even bigger innovations, for more things to come. We have had great leaders leading Xbox up to this point, and you probably saw the recent announcement from last week about our top leadership changes in Xbox. We've been fortunate to have great leadership who help innovate the not only just Xbox but the gaming industry, right? But now we have a different leader that would bring a different perspective in, and with the technology changing, with all the things that we're surrounded by, what I see is opportunities. And going back to what we started with earlier of
mhm,
focusing on the what and why, instead of why is this changing? Why do we have a new leader? Why do we have, why is AI, how is AI going to help us, and or it's taking my job away or my opportunities away, but focus rather on the what opportunities does it create for us. And so I would characterize it as it's it's huge opportunities for all of us to go define what's next for us.
mhm, mhm. Yep, totally agree. To round us out here, there was a comment about the book and the concept Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
Yeah.
I know many of us are familiar with that, and I think it does relate right to everything that we're talking about. It's like on one hand, you have to make quick, rapid decisions, and you have to go with intuition and gut and understanding, and then on the other hand, you have to practice that slowing down, reflection, introspection that we've been talking about. So as you think about the concepts that Kahneman brings forward there. Anything else come to your mind as you think about how to practice that in when you're trying to do things differently in your day to day and in your work or just kind of going through life? Anything come to your mind when you think about that concept and connecting it back to innovation?
Hmm. You want to go first? Because I'm thinking.
Sure. This is where going back to slowing down. And I
Mhm.
saw the question about, how, considering our innovation is not just about how cognition is not just individual, but culturally patterned and
Mm-hmm.
linguistically mediated.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if many people know this, but I was actually a language major.
Oh,
My undergrad degree was modern languages. And people often ask me, well, how did you get to tech? And did you regret studying languages? Um, and and I said, no, I didn't regret. In fact, now looking back, right, hindsight, I was like, that was actually very beneficial for
Mm-hmm.
me in what I do and in my role of this bridge making and connecting. Because what do we need to do to connect, whether it's ideas or people or processes? It's language, right? And when you learn a language or when you translate a language, it is the ability to deconstruct something quickly to what is the problem, what's the essence, and then reconstructing it in a different way for people to understand it. And guess what? That deconstructing and reconstructing is, it's innovation. It's what we were
Yep.
saying before. It's the definition of the other half of the innovation definition, right? Which is to look at things differently and solving it in a different way,
Hmm.
solving the same problem in a different way. So
Hmm.
I think that that training is what honed my skills as a consultant, as this behind the scene magic maker of bringing people together.
Hmm.
Um, and so language is important. Um, in fact, the ability to articulate what we're feeling, how are we feeling, and being able to distill it down to what is the essence, what's the issue that we're dealing with, is
Right.
is so key. And you need the pauses to get us to that. Otherwise, when we're swirling, we can't think creatively. We can't
Mm-hmm.
do that. So I go
Hmm.
back to the whole, thinking fast and slow. It's you do need to slow down for us to get to center and then be creative.
Love it.
That it reminds me of the piece I wrote a couple weeks ago about the art of abstraction. And it all ties back together. Like you studied linguistics. I studied mechanical engineering, but I studied philosophy in parallel. And I remember if I had any brilliant moment in my life, it was me as a 17-year-old saying, well, one's going to teach me the answers that I have to know. And one's going to teach me there are no answers. And I have to defend my opinion or my thought, and I have to break it down. And I'm so grateful to have both of those in the toolbox. Um, but it also connects to we don't spend a lot of time educating in the education systems worldwide with that layer of it's almost like I kind of cringe when the meeting starts and in certain crowds they'll be like, let's have a moment of silence to reconnect with nature. And I'm like, okay, like my mechanical engineer in me is like, ah, like I've never been good with the hippy dippy. Um, but that's almost like a veneer of mindfulness. That ability you describe of compressing complexity and breaking it down into its constituent parts and learning about those parts and then adding it back together in a new recombinatory way, whether that's how you take notes or how you build a product. You're right. That's the whole crux of it. Like that's innovation in a nutshell. Um, so thinking fast and slow, I think learning how to turn the gator mind off to get to the judging mind, that's those little habits and tricks and rocks and fingers and stuff. So
Mhm.
we all
Yeah.
need, I don't think I maybe the takeaway for me is let's not judge ourselves that we're not very good at it, because honestly somewhere in our history as humans we stopped teaching it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I have
And I
one final
think,
thought, Taryn. Can I jump in really quick before you close this
please,
out?
yes.
What JoAnn just mentioned reminded me of what the co-founder and president of Anthropic, which is one of the largest, one of the forefront AI companies, and her name is Daniela Almeida, I believe, and she was a literature major.
Hmm.
And there was an interview with her recently where people say, "Hey, would you go back and choose that again? Since you're so deep in AI in your craft,
Yeah.
right? Do you
Yeah.
think would you recommend people still go into humanity, into literature?" And she's like, "Absolutely." Why? Because it goes back to the humanity part. It goes back to the humans. And who are the humans? It's us, every individual. We are the total sum part of humanity. So if we can start with us and every single one of us can start doing that,
Yeah.
that's how we push through change.
Awesome. That is a perfect point to end on, and so impactful. So, Juliana, thank you so much for your time, JoAnn. Thank you. And I hope you all appreciated the conversation. There's a whole lot more just perspective, and think about that 90% of where you're focusing your energy and what's getting measured. And this was amazing. Thank you all. We'll follow up with emails as usual, and subscribe to the series so you don't miss them. We do these monthly and always bring on people, different perspectives, and are really going back to that learning and that pause. So this is your learning and your pause for the day. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks, Taryn.
Mhm.